eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you, for you, for you, for you, for
Hi everyone, welcome to Deception Detection Radio. I'm Kay.
And I'm Chad.
We pray you all had a blessed week. Tonight we are so pleased to welcome back Mark Combs to Deception Detection Radio. Welcome, Mark. It is always a joy to have you on with us. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Kay. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you again.
It's wonderful. Chad and I always look forward to having you on. It's always interesting, and we always learn whenever you're on with us, and we know that you're having the same effect on our listeners, so you're very much appreciated.
Yes.
Well, hopefully we can bring some good food for thought tonight. I know the topic that we're discussing is one that is wildly speculated upon. It's a fun topic for discussion, but hopefully we can bring some things to the table tonight that will also be some good things for consideration overall.
Yes, it's about time for this type of discussion that isn't just doom and gloom. That, you know, I'm tired of the fear porn, and I know Chad is, and it's time to get into the meat of God's Word and what we're supposed to do. So, Chad, would you like to lead tonight's prayer for us, and then we'll go ahead and get into everything.
Okay. Dear Father, we come before you tonight humbly and ask that you bless this program, bless our listeners, open us up, and let us use your words, not our words. We ask that not only do the listeners find this show informative, but also edifying as well. And we ask that anybody who has not found you, that they do seek you out, and that they come to know you like we know you, and that they turn their lives over to you, and that they become saved. We ask these things humbly in your name, your holy and mighty name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chad. Well, Mark, we've had you on several times now, and I know there's some people that probably are not familiar with you. You've written one of my favorite books, In the Beginning, and could you please tell everyone else a little bit more about you and about your book, In the Beginning?
Well, I put together the pieces for this book actually several years ago, and about 2 years ago, I began to work through some of those pieces in detail. The book itself is about the story of Noah and the flood, and there are, oh my goodness, just plenty of books on Noah and the flood. And so, you know, why write another one? Really, this was a personal journey for me. And Kay, I think you've heard me describe it that way before.
Yes.
I didn't want to take this approach of retelling the Bible story and trying to fill it in with certain morals or teaching points. I took a little bit of a different approach. There are some legitimate questions about the story of Noah and the flood. And these are questions that those who would be critical of the story really center in upon, and they really work those to the detriment of causing doubt and confusion, because some of the questions, some of the, I'll use the term accusations, are difficult to answer. They really are. And some of those very things I had questions about as well. And so this is my personal journey. I felt like those were legitimate questions. I didn't want to deflect. I didn't want to dismiss them. And I didn't want to write a book that was very similar to other books that were out there. My book was one that hopefully anyone would be able to pick up, whether they are a person of faith or a person of doubt, a person who would be critical of the story. And I tried to approach it in that way. I was very fortunate while I was writing the book. I had 3 people who were working with me as proofreaders. One was my mother. She was 88 years old at the time I was writing the book, and she was reading through it. She read through page after page after page as I was writing it. And then once the book was out in publication, she was probably one of the first people to pick up a printed copy and read it from cover to cover again. And it's interesting, some of the dialogue and conversation I had with my mother about different things in the book. One of the things I really appreciated about that was I knew that I was putting things out that were easy to be understood, comprehended, followed along with, and discussed. My mother at age 88 was really engaged with that. Now, my mom, very fortunate in that she was sharp all the way up to the final day that we spent together, and she passed away in January. And that's another interesting story of how God does certain things in our life. Just a wonderful experience for both myself and my brother. The delight of the memories that we share about my mom and the way that she went home to be with the Lord was very special for both of us. The other person that was reading this book was my brother. Now, my brother is from a religious background. He spent the majority of his adult life in church, either as a teacher or an instructor on some level to either young adults, people of his age, or later in life, adults and families. And so he had a biblical knowledge and background, and I was really fortunate to have him read through it with me because he would question me on many of the things that I was bringing out that maybe weren't along the common belief storyline that you would get in a day-to-day church environment. And it made for great discussion with him. He pushed back on some things and made me dig a little bit deeper on some things. And I was really fortunate to have that because I wanted it to be a book that would challenge all people to think and to dig and to research and to just write something that the average person was just going to pick up, thumb through page after page after page in total agreement and never have anything that forces them to think. I didn't really feel like that I was accomplishing anything in putting out that type of an end product. And through my brother, I understood that I was challenging him to think and reconsider some of his positions. And some of those positions actually changed over time, as did mine. The third person that I had working with me on this was my wife. My wife is from the state of Montana. She was not raised in a church environment, whereas she was somewhat familiar with the story of Noah and the flood. It was from a distance, and so she did not have a lot of the other background elements that many people who had spent a lifetime in a church environment would have. So she was kind of reading it, I would say, from a church outsider perspective, or someone that just doesn't have that type of teaching background in their life to where they have all the guideposts in place to build upon. And I was fortunate in that aspect because she was able to tell me at what point she could follow along with the story and at what point I needed to come back in and clarify some things. She was also able to give me feedback as to if it was holding her interest as someone who did not grow up in the church. And that was very important to me because I wanted this to be a book that someone who was not a person of faith could pick up, read through, and actually be challenged to think. I don't expect everyone to agree with my viewpoint, and to be honest, my viewpoint at the end of the book was very different than what it would have been when I began my research. So the research itself changed me, and this ended up not being my thoughts and my ideas, but rather where the research led. And that's why I refer to it as this is my own personal journey, a journey of growth. Now, coming on the heels of that, that led to a number of questions from my wife about, okay, we now have Noah and his 3 sons and their wives, etc., on the other side of the flood. How does this grow into the kingdoms of the ancient world? And so that's the book I'm currently working on, that you've heard me mention a couple of times in the past. This one is called Beginning the End. The first one was End the Beginning. This one is called Beginning the End. And it will take from the sons of Noah and go up through the Tower of Babel. And I'm really hoping to have that released sometime next summer.
We're really excited about that. We can't wait.
It's going to be a fun read. It really is. There's, again, a lot of things that the research has changed my perspective on. And so I think it's going to be, I feel like if those who have picked up this book, if they enjoyed the way that it was laid out, the writing style, and the things that were in this book, I think they'll really enjoy book number 2 as well.
Well, in the beginning, to me, it was a page turner. I didn't want to put it down. The flow was so good, and everything was laid out just the way it should be to understand it and to actually become involved in with what you were saying. The perception was there. It was being able to see everything in the mind's eye.
And it's funny, I talked to, you guys may be familiar with Brian Godawa, who's written a series of books on the Chronicles of the Nephilim. I talked to him just last week, and he was telling me about how his series of books, the Chronicles of the Nephilim, which is a series of fictional books based in biblical history as well as world history from other cultures and other beliefs. But he was telling me how that series of books actually came into being, and he actually started with the story of Noah, and he wanted to produce something. Now, Brian is in Hollywood. He's actually a screenwriter and movie producer, and he wanted to put together a screenplay for the story of Noah that could be turned into a movie. And as he found out as he got into it that Darren Aronofsky was actually working on the same topic, and it actually gotten green-lighted for his movie Noah. And we discussed that a little bit. And I had to confess with Brian, I wasn't sure what Darren Aronofsky's movie was about, but that came the announcement that the movie Noah was coming out and the previews for the movie and all that stuff. All of if you can think back to when you first began to see that in, I would say, fall of 2014, all of those things, summer, fall of 2014, all of those things were coming out as I was about midway through compiling the data for this book. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to have this book put together, ready to go. And then this movie is going to hit and everybody's going to have the story of Noah, and I've wasted my time. Well, my perspective that's released in the book In the Beginning is a little bit different than the story that Aronofsky tells in the movie Noah.
It's quite different. It's
slightly.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't even think
at certain points.
I don't even think Darren knew what that movie was about. So
he brought up some key things that I actually picked up on and kind of enjoyed a little bit that I think many people wouldn't have, but because of the research I had done, I kind of knew where he was coming from. Now, let's just say
are you talking about the rock monsters?
Well, he missed some opportunities here and there. I would just look at that because, I've never written a screenplay. I've never had a movie produced. I don't know what all goes into it. I fully don't expect that to ever happen in my lifetime, although it will be nice, I've had some people say, well, if they ever turned your book into a movie, how would you open it? Well, trust me, I've got some ideas on how I would open things, but I felt like there were some opportunities missed in that one.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And you said that very nicely, Mark.
Yes. A lot nicer than I would have.
More nicely than you would have, huh?
Oh, yes.
Chad can be blunt sometimes. Usually it's not when we're on the radio, but he can have his blunt moments.
I've been accused of being brutally honest.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
No. Well, we're going to get into something that Chad and I both have felt that needed addressed lately. We're seeing so much in the news about this Planet X, aka Nibiru, that doomsday is right around the corner. Everybody get ready. People are more afraid of this thing that we don't even know if it really exists, rather than putting their time into getting closer to God.
Right.
And it's quite disturbing. There's so much fear porn out there.
And it's always going to hit. It's every year. It's you know, like
it's something.
This year it's coming. It's coming. It's rounding the sun and it's coming. Every year.
And the months get pushed back.
Oh no, every year they're like, oh, it's not this year, it's next year.
I want to tell you that to begin with, I had the idea or concept of Planet X or Nibiru is in my book. I will tell you it was not in my book originally. It forced itself into the pages. I will tell you that I was not a believer in anything of the sort. I was a skeptic and a scoffer. I would have made fun of those folks, and you know, I still might on occasion because of the way they approach it. But I think there's plenty of data to indicate that there may indeed be another planet or a planetary type object. I'm very hesitant in the words I choose at times because I don't regard it as a planet. Zecharia Sitchin did, and we'll probably talk about him in just a minute. But I don't regard it as a planet. I do refer to it or attempt to refer to it as a planetary object. But I do believe there's plenty of evidence to indicate that it's out there. And there is some things on our upcoming horizon, and I'm going to say, you know, a few years from now. I don't have the exact dates, but this is common knowledge on the internet. There are some things where we do have a legitimate asteroid that we will need to be somewhat concerned about. It's still out in the future, but it's following a specific path. We've been tracking it for years. And these are the things that actually don't come to light because people are trafficking in, as you say, Kay, the fear porn, because that gets people to click on their podcast and to share their links and all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, there's legitimate information out there. So maybe we'll talk about some of those things as well.
All right. I want everyone that's listening now to know tonight's show is not your typical Planet X. So if you've tuned in and you've heard that and you think, well, I don't want to hear it, it's just going to be the same thing. This isn't. This is going to prayerfully open your eyes to the other side of it, the non-panicky side, the biblical side of it. So we pray that you'll stay tuned and hear us out. And Mark, you did mention Zecharia Sitchin, and he believed that there was another heavenly body in our solar system. How do you equate that to actually what is going on now? Do you believe he was talking about the actual Planet X or the one that you're talking about that is way down the line?
Well, I want to give a little bit of background on Zecharia Sitchin, and there may be some in the audience. It's probably a lot of folks in the audience that are familiar with the name. There may be some folks that are very familiar with his books and his teachings and the things that he believed. And those things are still being taught today. He still has a very strong following, although he has passed away. I actually own either 7 or 8 of his books. I've read the majority of them. I think I've read 6. I think I have 1 left on the shelf that I haven't read. And then there's one book that is called, it's a handbook of the Earth Chronicles, which is what his series of books is known as the Earth Chronicles. And there's one that's a handbook of, it's kind of like a glossary of terms. So it's not one you would sit down and read from page 1 through to the end. It's more of a reference volume. That would be the 8th book that I have. So I'm very familiar with Zecharia Sitchin, and I will tell you that he presented himself as someone who was a scholar in the ancient Akkadian, Sumerian, Babylonian languages as far as reading. Well, as far as reading the cuneiform tablets and things of that nature, which were discovered and were on for more than a decade, were actually in a back room at the British Museum. But eventually made known to the public, and scholars began to work at trying to interpret them. Well, Zecharia Sitchin was one of those that began to interpret some of the things that were coming out of the tablets. The thing was, Zecharia Sitchin took a lot of that information and put it together in his series of books. Now, some cornerstone players in his series of books would have been the alien race of beings known as the Anunnaki, leaders along that hierarchy, some of those known as Enki, Enlil, Ea, Marduk. And these are some of the characters that would come out in his writing and in the book series. And then, of course, also the planet that they were all from, which was the planet of Nibiru, or the planet of the crossing. Now, I want to go right up front and say that if you really are interested in this, I'll give you two resources if you're really interested in this. One central resource and one that you can stem off of from there. All of this material is, I mean, we live in a fantastic age. All of this material, all of those tablets, can be read at this point in almost any language. They have been interpreted, they have been deciphered, and you can actually go and read through the information for yourself if you want to, and it is available. The easiest place to get it is a website that was put together years ago by Dr. Michael Heiser, and the website is simply called Sitchin is Wrong. It's very easy to find, and it's very easy to navigate, and has a ton of information. His basic premise that he put out years ago, because Michael Heiser is a language scholar, he is everything that Zecharia Sitchin presented himself as. Michael Heiser said that many of the things that Zecharia Sitchin would put forth in his books actually aren't even in the tablets at all. And one of the things that is very commonplace in the writings of Zecharia Sitchin is that he will give you a reference for where something can be found, but he won't tell you exactly where it can be found. In other words, he will reference that, you know, it says in the Babylonian story of creation, the Enuma Elish, that A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay. Well, you can spend all day reading through the Babylonian story of creation and not really find exactly what he says is there. And he'll do that in a number of places throughout his books. He does that with biblical reference. He'll say it's in the book of Isaiah, but not tell you exactly where in the book of Isaiah. That is commonplace in his writings. He's very obscure when he gives references as to where something can be found. For someone like myself, that became very frustrating because I want to get to that source. I want to go back to exactly where he's pulling this information from, and it's very difficult to do with his writings. The bottom line is that Zecharia Sitchin, once his initial book began to take hold and gain publicity and popularity, he began to produce other books off of it, and I think he actually began to buy into his own narrative. It is amazing storytelling. It is really good, riveting reading. I enjoyed it, and I'm just being honest with you. I enjoyed reading it. It's fascinating. But is it an accurate representation of what is in those ancient Sumerian, Babylonian, and Akkadian historical documents and tablets? It's not. It just isn't. And that's one of the things that Michael Heiser kind of points out and calls attention to.
And another little fact that they don't really talk a whole lot about is that Zecharia Sitchin was also a Mason. There's actual photos that you can find online of him at Masonic rituals. And another thing is that he's also heavily affiliated with the Vatican. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but in the newest documentary that Timothy Alberino and Steve Quill put out, there was a gentleman in the documentary that Timothy is actually interviewing, and he was going back and forth between the Vatican to Sitchin in New York and taking boxes that he was not allowed to open, and that, you know, Sitchin would actually look over whatever it was that he was bringing to him and then sending information back to the Vatican on what it was.
I know that there are many people who believe the Sitchin was affiliated and associated with the government to put forth a certain agenda. I do know that he had open access to the head of the U.S. Naval Astronomy, which was Robert S. Harrington, and had open access to him. In fact, there's videos available on YouTube of him having conversation with Robert S. Harrington regarding Nibiru or Planet X. And, those are very popular in the fact that they do seem to link the two together with a confirmation that what Zecharia Sitchin is pulling from the older documents, the United States Naval Observatory is confirming. So those are some interesting things that are out there that people do tie together and seem to legitimately tie together with some amount of credibility.
So do you think that the 1997 episode of Coast to Coast where Father Malachi spoke with Art Bell and was talking about Grand Mountain, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Do you think that ties in as well?
I think we can read a lot into that based on the way that Malachi Martin kind of disseminated the information. I have listened to that particular broadcast in its entirety. I've also listened to those specific segments. And I believe that Dr. Malachi Martin did indicate that the Catholic Church, and you're talking about them having one of the most powerful observatories and telescopes in the world on Mount Graham. Is the Lucifer telescope correct? Is that where we're going?
Yes, Lucifer. That's actually able to see in all sorts of different...
all sorts of different spectrums.
Yeah, all the different spectrums that most telescopes aren't even able to do that. That's what the Lucifer device actually does. And it's specifically designed and built to look into deep space.
Mm-hmm. Now, and here's the thing, Father Malachi Martin indicated that they were there because they were looking for those things that they might see in the future in the next 5 years to the next 10 years. And I think if you said it's a 1994 episode, correct, Ted?
It was 1997. Yeah, so that would have been 2007 would have been 10 years.
Yeah, it goes back in excess of 20 years, that particular episode. I know it goes back a ways, but it's still available on YouTube for those that want to look it up. Just research Malachi Martin. I think he did 4 or possibly 5 interviews with Art Bell, and this is in one of those interviews.
Yeah, he actually pressed him hard because he was like, he goes, and you guys muscled your way under the mountain, and he goes, and I do intend to use those terms. And he was like, he goes, what exactly are you guys doing up there? And he said, well, we're basically watching what's approaching the Earth. And, it's just like, okay.
Here's the thing, and you have to keep this in mind with anything. The Catholic Church has a far-reaching research and development organization, the Jesuits and others. They want to stay on top of the narrative. So, in essence, they want to know as soon as or before anyone else knows so that they can kind of control the narrative. And I don't think it's a surprise or a shock to anyone that the Catholic Church has a preparation in place for the announcement of extraterrestrial life forms.
Exactly.
And they already have things in place to welcome them as brothers in the universe. Now, we could off on that a little bit, but that is a very interesting aspect. That is why the Catholic Church is interested in these types of things.
Well, they even posed the point that, could they even baptize an alien? And they came out and said that they could. And, getting into the whole thing about the Jesuits, well, we know that this current pope that we have is a Jesuit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, is there hasn't been a Jesuit pope in hundreds of years, and now we've got a Jesuit pope. And another thing that Timothy Alberino brought up here recently that was real interesting, and we actually ended up doing a show on, was that Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton's vice president,
mm-hmm.
he is Jesuit trained.
Correct.
So that's the thing, is that if anything were to happen to Hillary...
I will say that is my understanding, and I don't want to wax political here, but For those who are listening that are considering their options at the polls, this is probably the first time in my lifetime, and I'm in my mid-50s, this is probably the first time in my lifetime of voting for a presidential candidate where I have seriously considered their running mate as someone who, in either short order or at some extended point in time, will most likely be sitting in the Oval Office. And I've never felt that way before, but it's kind of weighed into my decision making with this particular election. And I apologize for waxing political there, but since you brought up,
No, I want you. If you wanted to go there, I want you to go there. That's the thing is, I don't think people. A lot of people that when they hear the term Jesuit, they're like, I don't know what that is. They just know it has something to do with the Vatican. They don't really understand who the Jesuits are, or what the Jesuit order is all about. They don't
or their oath.
Yeah, and they don't understand that it's basically a secret satanic society within the Vatican. I mean, these people do not believe in Jesus Christ and God. I mean, even if they do, they don't adhere to him. They have their own belief system. They worship Lucifer. That's all it boils down to. And like I said, they don't realize just how bad it could actually be with a Jesuit-trained president and a Jesuit pope. I don't think that they fully understand the ramifications of it.
Well, and I think the connections there are very interesting connections, especially in light of how some folks would interpret biblical prophecy for the end times. So I think that gets to be a very interesting consideration. When you look at those puzzle pieces and how they most likely would fit together if they're given an opportunity to fit together.
Yeah, I'm sorry to take it off in that direction. I just wanted to get I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. I apologize.
That's okay. We can rabbit trail. That's part of what makes this program fun, is that we start with one topic and very rarely end up there.
We say we ask God to lead it, and so we go wherever we're led, rabbit trail and all.
Rabbit trail and all. There we go. But I think for those and there are many who still hold to and teach and support the works of Zecharia Sitchin, not as anything other than the true ancient history of life on Earth. There are some who absolutely take it as doctrinal belief, and for those who are familiar with it, there are some that are not only familiar with it, but hold to it as a matter of their faith as to this is where our origins came from. And some of that can tie in with the potential announcement of an extraterrestrial life form. And that might make for an interesting show for you, Kay, at some point in time to pull together a variety of different aspects on that one. But I've got to be honest, in my own personal belief, if we were told tomorrow morning that there are aliens living among us on this earth, I don't think it would change my faith at all, not in the slightest. And there are some who believe and who are concerned that an announcement of confirmed alien extraterrestrial life forms would completely destroy any type of religious-based faith system. And I've got to say that I disagree with that, and disagree with that for some very legitimate reasons, but that's a completely different discussion altogether.
Yeah, Chad and I, along with several others, we see aliens as interdimensional beings, and that they are actually demons, that the aspect of them being extraterrestrial is going to be part of the Great Deception. And they're going to make people believe that, there's going to be this spaceship or these space people that come down, and that they were sent here by God and they're just going to deceive people. But actually, the aliens are demons.
I don't think that they're going to say that they were sent here by God. I think that if they show up...
You don't think they will?
No, I think that they will show up and say that they created humanity, and they will probably even be so bold as to go ahead and say that, Jesus was one of them.
That's what I'm getting at.
As well as all the other prophets that were out there, they'll say that they basically sent all these prophets and steered us in all these different directions. But yeah, I'm in agreement with you. Yeah, and that's the thing is, if you look into a lot of the research, even Jim Wilhelmsen, who's very, very up on all this. I mean, he's studied a lot of the MUFON stuff, a lot of the abductee victims. That's the thing is that they talk about when they are abducted, they don't say that they go into outer space. They say that they were taken underground. Mm-hmm. They said that, that literally they either go underground or they go into the water and they travel underwater into, underwater caverns. But, that's the thing is they are all saying the same thing, that they basically will go, take a 2-hour trip underground and then, arrive at their destination underground. So that doesn't sound like aliens to me. Sounds like something totally different.
Yeah, it's all interesting, and some of these things we're not going to know until we go home, but we need to be ready for anything. There's a woman that lives here in Indiana, Mark, and she has posted some excellent videos up on YouTube showing multiple light sources in the evening, in the morning, that appear to be multiple suns. Mm-hmm. Now, if we do have a planetary object that's coming in, do you think that we'll be able to see it? What do you think will happen? What will its effect be on Earth?
That's I think, a legitimate question to ask, and I think that's one that we need to take a logical approach to. I've seen a lot of those pictures, and I mean, there's literally hundreds of thousands of them across the internet that are posted on a regular basis. I've also gotten pictures from my brother-in-law who lives and works in Alaska the majority of the year, and there is a certain thing when the sun is on the horizon that you can sometimes get a reflection that will give you the appearance of a double sun. This is a natural occurrence. It would be the same thing that you might be seeing if you were driving down a long straight stretch of highway, and it appears that off in the distance in front of you that there's a large puddle or body of water, but as you get closer to it, it disappears. This is a reflection that is caused by atmospheric conditions, and it's something that we're familiar with that. We've seen it. We know that when we get there, there's not going to be any water. But when we see what appears to be two suns on the horizon, it kind of freaks us out because that's not something you see every day. I will tell you that if such a time happens that a planetary object approaches Earth, you're going to see it every day. It's not going to be there one minute and not there the next. It's going to be a consistent, it's there. In my own understanding of how things of this nature would happen, as far as doing some research of things astronomy-wise, I think you could probably take the approach of a comet as a good mirror image of what we might see. As it is quite distant, you would only be able to see it through a telescope or, possibly binoculars if you had a real high quality set of binoculars. But more than likely, you would see it or discover it first through a high powered telescope. And then as it got closer, you would be able to see it through a lesser powered telescope or binoculars. And eventually, it would be available to the human eye as a small pinprick of light in the night sky. And if, as that comet approaches, it gradually gets larger and larger and larger to the point where it is unmistakable in the sky. There are times that when something like that approaches, we see it in our daytime sky and it's close enough that it is bright enough to see in the daytime sky. Most of the time, we can't see anything in the daytime sky other than our sun, because the sun is so brilliant in its radiance that it blocks out everything else that's actually there. Excuse me. But there have been times that as comets approach, their light, their reflectancy in the daytime sky is strong enough that they can be seen. The planet Venus at times gets close enough in its proximity to Earth with the way our rotation works that it can be seen either just before daybreak. Now, once the sun is fully up, it kind of fades from view, but you can kind of see it. That's why it's known as the morning star. It's the one that is very, very bright on the horizon. So those are the types of things that I would anticipate with something like this. And I would say that it's going to be something that you can track and it would be consistent. It's going to be there time after time after time after time. It's not going to be something that's there one day, not the next. I saw it 3 days later. No, it's going to be something that you could legitimately track as it goes.
And it also depends on where it's tracking from as well. If that's the thing, is if it was tracking from the other side of the sun, we wouldn't even see it till it was literally right up on us.
Well, but we would have been able to see it as it approached in some aspects, keeping in mind that these types of things take a number of days and months to position themselves, and the rotation of the orbit of the Earth around the sun is such that even if something was coming our way from the backside of the sun, within a period of about 2 to 2.5 months, we would be at an angle where we would be able to at least see a partial approach of it. So,
yeah, I should rephrase that. We'd be able to see it at night, just not during the day.
Right. So, it's not something that, I will say this, it's not something that will sneak up on us. It's something that we will definitely be able to see approaching. It will take a matter of months from the time it becomes visible to the naked eye. So it's not something that, you'll think everything's fine one day and then the next day you're going to wake up and Planet X is going to be zooming past. There's a much different aspect than that at play here.
Do you think with everything that's being put in the news, and I mean, it's overwhelming, you can't turn on any mainstream media or even on YouTube, and I don't watch that much mainstream. I only get an idea of what lies are being put out there. But do you think that they have any hard evidence that there is an extraplanetary body that is out there?
Sure. We've had that evidence since
1950.
Yeah, and a little bit before that, I think. But I think 1950 is one of the key dates.
Was that the Popular Science?
Yeah, you got the Popular Science article. You got the articles that were in the San Francisco Chronicle and Washington Post in, I think it was 1983. There's been stuff out there. It's been this case of we've had information put out, and then we've also had that same information interpreted in a different manner. And I think I dealt in the book with both the Popular Science article and then the articles in 1983 in the Washington Post and San Francisco Chronicle, because there is a lot of information there, and they can be tracked down, and the scientific reports can be found. It's not like they made an announcement and then, we never heard anything else again. And there were follow-up studies done, and there was follow-up information that was released, and it is available. And we included some of that in the book with respect to what was posted in the Washington Post with regard to this object. And so these are the things that I get to where I say there is legitimate information out there. I do believe that this is something that we had an idea of a number of years ago. I do think this is something that most likely was a driving point in our space program, in the development of our space program. Now, I'm going to have to apologize to those who believe in a flat Earth with with a globe ceiling over the Earth, because none of what I'm about to say will apply, in that case. But if we live on a sphere that is orbiting a sun, and there are other planets out there that follow a orbital path in much the same manner that we do, if we sent people to the moon, we also sent out the Pioneer space probes, and we also sent out the Voyager space probes. And those were sent out for very specific reasons. The Pioneer space probes were sent in two opposite directions. And then the Voyager space probes were sent to chase data that they got from one of those. And the Voyager space probes were sent out in a specific area. And the entire mission of the Voyager space probes was to find additional planetary objects. And so that's something that we do cover in a specific chapter of the book. As I said, when I began to come upon this information and these pieces began to fall into place for me, this isn't something I was looking for. It was just something that I couldn't get out of the way of as it began to accumulate. And we documented all of this. I mentioned earlier how frustrated that I got at times reading Sitchin, that he would tell you something was found somewhere and then you never could find it. My book has hundreds of footnotes in it that will take you to the exact story and the exact place where this information can be found, because I thought that was only fair to the reader. I didn't want anyone to take my perspective and my word on this. Here's where the research is. And I'll take you to the exact website or the exact document or the exact book where this information can be found, and you can look at it. So those were some of the things that, as we began to do some research onto this, I began to look at a little bit deeper with regard to our space program and the underlying purpose of it.
Mark, that's one thing that really fascinated me in your book, was the fact of your timeline. And that goes along with the next question that I have. Is there a cycle or a timeline that plays out as being consistent, or we can see as predictable? You really got into this into your book, and if you could kind of go into detail a little bit about the timeline, it would be really fascinating.
I'll try to do that. I'm also, Kay, I gave some consideration on this, and this is something that I know as you edit this and put it together, it'll be a couple of weeks before you actually put it out as a completed recording. In between now and then, what I'm going to try to do is update for you, specifically for your program and your listeners. I'm going to try to update the timeline chart that is in my book, because I do have some new information. And I'm going to upload that to my website, and I'll give you the link to the page that I upload it to, so that when you post this, you'll be able to post the link to that, so that people that want to go and look at this will be able to do that. This is one of the things that I dealt with in my book in passing, but also, and I say in passing, I dealt with it in a good portion of Chapter 8, but I also dedicated a complete appendix to this, because in the research that I was doing, one of the things we kind of discussed before is I was seeing different events in world history that were showing up as really pinpointing the concept, idea, and indication that there was an interaction of the Earth with something else that was causing an extreme amount of destruction capabilities on the Earth. And so that's something that, as I began to see those, I began to just put them in a timeline and see where things fell from that. Now, one of them that I put forth in the book is that this particular object was a catalyst in the initiation of Noah's flood. Now, that's not to say that Noah's flood was strictly a natural catastrophe. I want to really underscore this because I think this is something that's easy to overlook or something that could get lost in the shuffle here. The flood of Noah was a judgment on the population of Earth, specifically from the Creator. This is not the only type of or such judgment, okay, but I want to point that out because I don't want to give in any way an indication that I believe this interaction with this extraplanetary object was just a happenstance that, was going to happen anyway, and that produced the flood, and it's all natural causes. I do believe that Noah's flood was a specific judgment, and I believe that for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is that it was announced to Noah by the Creator himself. In Genesis, Noah was told, "The end of all flesh is come before me." And then he is given the instruction as to what he is to do. In the book of Jasher, we are given an indication that Noah and Methuselah were told to speak to the sons of men about their sin. And I'm going to use the word sin there, but the sons of men, the population of the earth, had stepped away from the proper worship of the Creator and had begun to be in allegiance to and alliance with other spiritual forces. It's very clear in several instances in several places of the Bible, not the least of which is just the opening of the Ten Commandments, that the Creator God is a very jealous God. There is none like him, and he does not share his glory or his worship with anyone.
Amen.
At all, period. And throughout the scriptures, you can see this come into play. It came into play 2 instances. The second was the flood of Noah. The first was one we're going to talk about in just a minute. But you see that in the flood of Noah, and it was announced to Noah, "I am going to do this for this specific reason." You see it also in the history of Israel, and I'm just going to give you one other instance, and then we'll get back to this calendar of events.
Do you see it as a separation of the wheat from the tares?
No.
Because that's okay.
Not specifically. The parable of the wheat and the tares is basically you couldn't tell the difference between the two. Okay. And God's not confused. He knows the difference between the two. But that's kind of a good analogy to bring up, because the second instance that I want to kind of give as an illustration here is the children of Israel and their exile into Babylon out of the promised land. They are taken from the very heart and center of where Yahweh was worshipped, and they are taken by a pagan nation brutally into Babylon. This was announced through the prophets. It was declared through the prophets. There were a number of false prophets who stood up and said, "No, we are God's people. We are living here, in God's land. This land will not fall. Judgment will not happen. We will not be, we may go through some tough times, but, we will survive. God will not allow Jerusalem to fall." There was this sense of invincibility. And you can see that in the writings of the Old Testament prophets, but the direct message was given to certain prophets to stand up and say, "No, you are going into exile, and you are going into exile for a very specific reason." And the very specific reason was that they had stepped away from their commitment to Yahweh as their God, and they had begun to worship other gods. The book of Ezekiel, very difficult book to read at times, but it gives some amazing insight as to what was going on even in the city of Jerusalem all the way into the temple complex itself where pagan gods were being worshipped. Pagan gods were being worshipped in the house of God. That's why you have this absolute utter exile of the Israelites into Babylon. And this, again, is a judgment. And God uses the nation of Babylon to do that. But this, again, is a judgment. This is underlying my statement earlier that Yahweh, the Creator, is a very jealous God. He will not allow the worship of another to stand before him. He is to be worshipped and only him. And you see this throughout the Bible. You see this throughout the teachings of Jesus. He's very adamant about that, and he takes that a lot more seriously than we do. We're very casual in our service, in our relationship with God. We're very casual with it. The Creator is not. He's very serious about it. Well, this is what we see in the days of Noah, and this is what we see in some other places. Let me get back to your question about the cycle, because I know I've rambled just a little bit here. The first one that we have that I pinpointed, and again, I will send you this chart because this is going to make a lot more sense if people can pull up a chart and look at it. It's not great for audio only without the visual. But the first one is the flood of Noah. That occurs in a timeline of 1,657 years from the point of creation. Now, is that an exact date? No, it's not. That is an assumption date based on the generations that were given throughout the book of Genesis leading up to the birth of Noah. The reason I say it's not an exact date is because we're told that someone was born in a certain year of their father's life. We're not told the month and the day. And so each time we're given that birth record or that birth cycle in the genealogy, there's a 12-month window for not margin of error, but margin of variability. So when I say that this occurred in 1,657 years from creation, that is an assumptive number that's fairly close, but probably not exact. Prior to that, though, there was another extreme destruction of the earth, or a portion of the earth, that's not recorded in the Bible, but it is recorded in the book of Jasher. This is one of the rivers that flowed out of Eden. It's the river Gihon, and it overflowed, and the book of Jasher says that it destroyed a full 1/3 of the earth. Now, that happened during the lifetime of Noah. Noah builds the ark and enters into the ark in his 600th year. This happens about 360 years before that, and the book of Jasher helps us kind of pinpoint exactly when that happened, and it is about a 360-year span of time. If we go from the time of the flood moving forward little by little, the next big event that we're going to see is the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel happens, I want to say, about 360 years or so after the flood event itself. It takes place, or about 350 years or so. It takes place around 1,999 years from the creation event. So you've got the flood happening around year 1657. You've got the Tower of Babel happening around the year 1998, 1999, sometime in that window. Again, you've got a cycle of 350 to 360 years before that happened. Now, in the chart that I give, I began to convert from what is marking time from the beginning of creation counting forward to what is marking time with what we know as years BC. And I've tried to explain this before in our previous conversation. I'll try to do it again real quickly here. When you get into the years BC, it's very difficult to be precise because cultures and nations and kingdoms marked things according to what year they happened in the reign of a certain ruler. And so you've got a lot of different kingdoms that mark things according to the reign of a certain ruler. And what you have to do is try to find contemporaries and put the puzzle pieces together. The person in history who perhaps did the best job of this was Bishop Ussher in his exhaustive book on the annals of world history. In that book, he kind of helps us align some things with what year they would be on the BC calendar, or as we know it today, the BCE calendar. We've got two events that kind of fall in there. Keep in mind when you're counting BC, the larger the number, the further back you're going in time. One of those events is going to align with China, and it's going to fall in approximately year 1486 BC. The Chinese astronomers marked a very large and unusual object in the sky that was in the sky for a number of months. This object grew to enormous size. It had 10 trailing tails off of it. This is all documented in the Chinese historical records, and I do footnote this in the book so people know exactly where it comes from. But it had 10 tails that trailed off of it, and as it was leaving, the Chinese recorded that it appeared that it showered the sky with raining bits of fire. In other words, there was what I would call a meteor shower, or what we might think of as a meteor shower, as on the exit of this particular object. Again, we have an object that they observed coming in and they observed going out. It grew to a very large size, something much larger than anything they had previously observed. They actually named this object the Great God because they believed that these trailing objects in the sky were actually deities. And this gets back to some ancient culture that I'll go into a little bit in the second book that I have coming out next year. But they revered these things as actual deities. And this one they referred to as the Great God because it was so far and above anything they had ever observed before. The next object on the timeline happens about 350 years or so after that. It's in the reign of an Egyptian pharaoh, Thutmose III. He reigns in Egypt around 1100 BC, and in Egypt, they document this object. They track it coming in, they track it going out, and they actually give measurements of it. And the measurements they give of this particular object is that it measured 20 rods in diameter. Now, that's only interesting to us because the Egyptians also measured the full moon as being 5 rods in diameter. Okay?
Big difference.
It is a big difference, and I misspoke on the number. They measured this object as being 100 rods in diameter. It was 20 times the size of the full moon. In measurement. Again, they tracked it coming in, they tracked it going out. It did great devastation as it interacted with the Earth. Now, if I looked up in the night sky and I see Venus being extremely bright, I want to tell you I'm drawn to that. I am absolutely drawn to it because it's the brightest thing in the sky. But it is 1/50th the size of the full moon. If I looked up in the night sky and I saw something that was even 1/10 the size of the full moon, I would be more than curious. I would be to the point of my curiosity might turn to a little bit of fear of what in the world is this? I got to research this. What are people saying about it? If that began to grow to the point where it was 1/3 the size of the full moon, and then eventually 1/2 the size of the full moon, and then eventually the same size as the full moon, all of a sudden we've got an event that stops people in their tracks. This is earth-shattering history here. In Egypt, they are marking this, and they're marking it as not being the same size as the full moon. They're marking it as being 20 times the size of the full moon. That's enormous.
It's hard to imagine.
It is hard to imagine. And I've got to say that all I'm doing is presenting the ancient Egyptian records, okay, from their astronomical records. And I tell you exactly where to find that. We go forward off of that one, 360 years forward off of that one, and we get to a king in the northern part of Israel named Uzziah. And in his days, there was a great earthquake that shook the entire region, not just the area that he was in, not just his city, but the entire region of the Middle East. That's recorded. It was also a large sky object associated with this. This is so substantial that the book of Amos references it, and I give you the references for that. And it's also so substantial that modern day science has tracked back to when this event actually happened and given a date, an exact date of June the 15th, 763 BC. I give you the exact place where you can find that, okay? Mm-hmm. That dates back to things that are recorded in Zecharia, Isaiah, and Amos. We go forward from there, and I've got a couple of blank spots where I just don't have anything. We come forward a little bit further. We have the crucifixion event with Christ, where we're probably familiar with that event. There is a great earthquake, such that shook the city of Jerusalem to its core, even to the point where the temple was shaken to its foundation, the graves were opened, the veil of the temple was rent in twain. As I said before, when something like that happened, the veil of the temple separated the Jews from the presence of God. To be in the presence of God was death. When that veil of the temple was torn in two, and the entryway was open, that terrified the Jews. That literally terrified the Jews beyond anything that I can describe in language. This is the death of the Messiah, and we have a couple of places in the Gospels where we are told that it was accompanied with a 3-hour period of darkness. Now, this isn't the only place that this event is recorded. It's also recorded in ancient history, and it's recorded by people who were not friends of Christianity. They were actually enemies of the cross. One such person is a writer by the name of Thallus. He refers to it, and we give documentation of it in the book. He refers to this event, and when it happened during a period of time that was Passover, which would have been a time of a full moon, which means you could not have an eclipse of the sun by the moon. You cannot have an eclipse during a full moon, but you do have a blackening out of the sun. And Thallus writes about this, okay, and we give documentation of that. This is in 32 AD, the crucifixion of Christ. We come forward from that a little bit, and I've got a couple more that I'll give you real quick. As I said, I know that this just, when you're hearing audio of this kind of stuff, it's just, it's hard to piece it together without the visual. But as you come forward a little bit, you get into 1054 AD. This is something that you've got two different opinions on this particular incident. This is a hard date and time, 1053 to 1054 AD. This gets into the Chinese astrological records, where they documented something that they called the Chinese guest star. They tracked it for 13 months coming in, 13 months going out, total of 26 months. That's over 2 years. This is one of the reasons why I say that Planet X / Nibiru / whatever you want to call it is not going to sneak up on us. It's just not. Mm-hmm. People will see it coming, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But this particular guest star, there are some who feel like that this was the formation. What they were looking at was the death of a star and the formation of the Crab Nebula. There are other people that look at this Chinese research and say, no, they actually tracked it as being in different locations in the sky, coming in, going out. There's research on both sides. I present both of that, okay, in the book and tell you where you can find the information. That's 1054. As you move forward a little bit, the next 350-year cycle is going to take you into an interesting portion of European history. I don't have this in the book. This is something that someone sent to me. I've looked into the documentaries. It's very intriguing, and I may update it into the calendar of this. But this is something that if you look into into the annals of European history and research a time period that's known as the Little Ice Age, you are going to find something very interesting that scientists believe triggered that Little Ice Age. Now, this was a period of time where it got so cold in different portions of Europe that societies had to move. Cultures had to relocate because the temperatures dropped to the point of Ice Age conditions. And it changed life in Europe. This was a drastic change. Okay, we talk about climate change today or global warming, or I don't think they call it global warming anymore. I think they call it climate change.
They do.
Yeah, and it's like, you're a fool if you don't believe in climate change. Well, yeah, I believe in climate change because, just 6 weeks ago it was 100 degrees here, and about 6 weeks from now the high is going to be about 73. So I believe in climate change. It does change. And yes, the climate of the earth does go through certain cycles. We know this. It goes a little bit warmer, a little bit colder, and we can track that over a period of hundreds upon hundreds of years. Well, this in the 1400s, the Little Ice Age was drastic, and it was in one particular area, and it was caused by an immense amount of volcanic activity that all took place at one time. And there are some people who think that there was something that triggered that volcanic activity. It's interesting where that falls in our little time frame here. And these aren't, I'm going out trying to find something to throw into the slot. This is, I see an event and it just happens to fall right in that slot. The next one in line is the last one that I have in my timetable. This one is from 1744 AD, Swiss astronomer Jean-Philippe Chizot, and I know that I am brutally destroying that name. I wish I could pronounce it a lot better than that. Chad, maybe if you can run that through your computer program and I can get an accurate pronunciation of that. But this is 1744 AD. This is a Swiss astronomer, and I'm going to give you two incidences in connection with this because we've got information from the Swiss and we've also got information from the Chinese about this event. The Swiss astronomer documented this particular item or incident, which is identified as a comet. And I want to stress that because when you research this, you are going to find that it's identified as a comet. And we are told that this particular comet has, what's the word I'm looking for? It's fallen apart. It's no longer out there, self-destructed. It's fallen apart. But this particular comet grew to 8 times the size of the full moon. Again, absolutely eye-popping data that you just shake your head at and go, I can't even believe this. Now, was that the length of the tails? Was that how much of the sky it filled up? Some of the research I found said that was the central portion of the comet, was 8 times the size of the full moon. It had 7 tails that protruded upward, even in daylight, protruded upward from the edge of the earth into the sky. And it also interacted, and they didn't realize this is what it was doing at the time, but the Chinese were the ones who documented the tails on this thing. And I guess that's really the thing for Chinese astronomy is that they grade their comets by how many tails they have. And that's why the one that had 10 tails was super impressive. This one had 7, at times 8, but it made audible sounds as it passed the Earth. Science today would tell us that's because it got close enough to the Earth to interact with the Earth's magnetosphere. It interacted with our magnetic field, and that's what made audible sounds. And the Chinese document that. This is all in the book, and I give footnote after footnote after footnote of where all of this information can be found. Okay, So it's very easy to look at that and go, okay, this is stuff that Mark just made up. No, this is stuff that I researched. This is stuff that anyone can go back and chase through the popcorn trail and see where the information came from. And they can either get substantiation for themselves, or they can tear apart the information that I put out there. Whatever they want to do with it, I wanted them to know where to find it. I want them to have a starting point. I don't have anything to hide. I didn't want to be confusing on this. This was just information that I came across. Now, you've got people that are saying, hey, Planet X was due last Easter. Well, it didn't come. Oh, that's right. I miscalculated a little bit. It's due next Easter. And they're aligning it with the Jewish festivals and holidays. And I've got to say that I do believe that there is something of significance in the time periods of the Jewish festivals and holidays. We just had the Jewish festival of Yom Kippur, and you'll remember we discussed that in our last program of the Day of Atonement and everything that was going on with that. Well, we just had that a few weeks ago. Well, I do think the Jewish festivals give us a lot of information, not only as to what is going to happen, but when, what standpoint and time point of the year it's going to happen. So I think they're very important. I don't think they should be overlooked. But I've got to say this, these people that are pointing to this happening have the return of this object on a time frame that doesn't even fit with their own cycle that they're projecting. Their own cycle is 360, 340, 360, 340, and then all of a sudden this next return, which is supposedly right around the corner next Easter, falls into a time frame of 316 or 317 year cycle. So extremely compressed, quite a bit compressed.
Way off the mark.
Well, I don't know. This is the thing I have to say. I can't say they're off the mark. I can say that I don't really hold to that theory, but I can also say there's some very interesting things that they present when they pull up their astronomical data. It's interesting. Am I going to, just completely rearrange everything in my life because of it? No, I'm not. I'm absolutely not. For two reasons. Number one, God is still God. And number two, I don't believe this item is going to sneak up on us. The last reason would be if I understand biblical prophecy at all, I do understand that we have a time period in which there will be a rise of power in this earth where you will have a one world government, a one world religious system, and some peace in the Middle East. I'm not seeing any of those things. Now, maybe they're on the horizon. Maybe all those puzzle pieces are starting to fall together, and I kind of think they are, but I don't think that's going to happen next week, and I don't think it's going to happen with this election in November or the coronation. Is coronation the right word? I think they say inauguration. I used coronation.
Inauguration, yeah.
Went royal on everybody.
I got a quick question for you, Mark. What are your thoughts on UN declaring that Jerusalem is not part of Israel?
I'd have to sit down and look at that, Chad, to be honest with you.
Okay. Well, they just recently, they voted on it there at the UN, and they said that they declared that Jerusalem is not part of Israel.
Yeah, I'd have to sit down and look at that. There's a lot of interesting things going on with the nation of Israel right now. I think some of them relate to Bible prophecy. I think some of them don't relate to Bible prophecy. And to be honest with you, one of the things I'm really researching with regard to Israel right now is the reconstruction of the temple that they're kind of on track for and why they're doing that. Because I've got some serious questions as to why you would rebuild the temple. And so that's really what I'm kind of digging into my own research right now.
Yeah, the Pope was just there not too long ago. He was over there. He was there for an entire month, and basically trying to create a one-world religion, trying to unite Christianity, Judaism, and Islam.
And I do think those puzzle pieces, there has to be peace in the Middle East at some point in time. I think the Bible clearly indicates that. And so I think those are puzzle pieces that will need to kind of fall together. How close they are, I'm not sure. In my lifetime, we have always been right around the corner from all of this happening.
Yes.
And now I'm in my mid-50s. Do I think that Christ will return and the end of the age will happen in my lifetime? There's a big part of me that would like to think so, but it may not happen. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean the Bible's not true. It doesn't mean that the information that we've been given is inaccurate. It may mean that we haven't interpreted it accurately and that we don't fully understand the things that we think we understand. But it doesn't mean that the Bible's not true, and it doesn't mean that God's not still working on his timetable for his return. I do believe that that is in the future.
Mark, I've got to ask you a question because speaking with the timeline, if you don't mind, I'd like to read a couple verses to you so you get an idea of where I'm coming from.
Okay.
It's from Revelation 6:13. And the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the other one is Revelation 8:10 and 11. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of the waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. Now, I believe, as you do, that we still have a lot of prophecy that has to be fulfilled before we get to this point in Revelation. How do you perceive that with those two verses and the looking at the cycle? I know God is not bound by time. It's non-existent. But what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think there's a couple of things there, and I'll tie that in with some of the words of Christ in Matthew 24 and Luke 21. But there are two schools of thought here, and I want to be respectful of both. One is a literal interpretation or a near literal interpretation, and the other is more of a spiritual or a poetic interpretation that would look at those things as being symbolic of certain spiritual events. And you can see some of that tracking through the scriptures as well. So I kind of want to be wholly responsible with both perspectives there, because I think both of them do have some validity, and both of them do have some areas where we could throw in some question marks and go, okay, are we really on target with this? I do believe that the things we see in the book of Revelation are a judgment on the earth. I think they are a distinct judgment on the earth for a specific reason. And I draw some of that out of the 14th chapter of the book of Revelation, where you see in verse 6 that an angel steps out of glory and announces to the inhabitants of earth that the time has come for judgment. And he reintroduces the Creator, the one who made everything. And you'll remember I said earlier in our conversation tonight that the Creator is very jealous of his position, and he won't share it with anyone. Okay. And we've gotten to a point in our society where we're completely dismissive of God in any type of sense or term, to the point where we want a, quote, freedom from religion and an aspect or an outlook that there is no God at all. Okay. And I've got to tell you that in some aspects, I understand where the concepts and ideas of the freedom from religion may be coming from, because there are certain religious aspects that I would like freedom from, okay? I don't want to be suppressed by man's belief and be put under man's authority because of their religious teachings. And I do think there's many religions in the world that do that. I'm not supportive of that. And you can draw your own connections there with what religions those may be, what beliefs those may be. But the other aspect there is that whether someone believes that God exists or believes that God doesn't exist has no impact whatsoever on who God is and whether or not he actually exists. The Creator is the Creator, whether we accept Him and honor Him as such or not. And if He is the Creator, and I personally believe that He is, He will remind us of that at some point in time. Keep in mind, every time you see a judgment in the Bible for a specific every time you see a judgment in the Bible, it is for a specific reason, and it's very clearly outlined. And usually, you will see the phrase "that ye may know," or "so ye shall know," or something along the lines. And it's not only for the people of God to know. In the case of Egypt, it was so that the people of Egypt would know. So God's not shy about declaring who He is when the time comes. He's just not. The question of wormwood does come up quite a bit. I do think that when this object passes back through, it will do so. It will interact with the orbit of the Earth at two separate points in time. And those two separate points in time will be separated by approximately 150 days or 5 months. We see that in the flood, and I think we will see that when this planet returns, and I think we see that portrayed in the book of Revelation. I'll tie what you said about the stars falling from heaven with what Jesus said, and you'll remember that His disciples pressed Him for an answer as to when the end of the world would be. And Jesus gave them several different answers to that. And one of the answers that He gave them was an indication that the powers of heaven would be shaken, the sun would not give its light, the moon would not give its light, and the stars would fall from heaven. So there is a tie-in there. I do think that it is spiritual in some aspect, but I also think it's physical in some aspect. Jesus said that men's hearts would fail them for fear of looking for those things which are coming upon the earth. One of the things that when we talk about fear, fear is perhaps the strongest emotion that we have that we deal with on a human level. Fear, and I'll put love on that equal emotion cycle of that. But fear grows out of our perception of things that are a part of the soon to arrive future. And sometimes it's fear of the unknown, but perhaps the most paralyzing fear is the fear of that which is known but not yet experienced. And I'll think back to my childhood, because I'll know there were times that I was doing things that were out of line, and my mom would look at me and she would just give me that look and give me that little finger wave of correction. And I knew that when we got home, business was going to pick up, and
Oh, yes.
that I want to tell you, there was a degree of fear that came with that. It wasn't a fear of the unknown, because I knew very well what was going to be happening. It was a fear of what was coming that I knew full well what it was, and that was terrifying because it plays on you. Well, Jesus in His comments said that men's hearts would fail them for fear. He described the powers of heavens being shaken. He also described things on the earth such as earthquakes, etc. So I think all of that plays in just a little bit. In the Old Testament book of Zecharia, we're given some other information that I think ties in with Revelation and also ties in with Matthew. Zecharia says that when Christ does return, this is when He returns to the earth. He is going to return to an area known as the Mount of Olives. This Mount of Olives area is a sacred area in Israel. It is the area where, in the days where Israel was going into exile, in the temple area in Jerusalem, the glory of God left the temple. And this is revealed to us in the book of Ezekiel, and I want to say chapters 8, 9, 10, somewhere in that range. The glory of God leaves the temple, and it goes out of the temple to the Mount of Olives and ascends from there. Well, this is exactly where we see Christ returning. This is also where Christ ascended from. And we have that in the end of the Gospels. We also have it in the book of Acts. But Zecharia tells us that when he returns, that the Mount of Olives will split in two parts, and will cleave. It will split north to south and cleave east to west, and that Christ will, when he puts his foot on, or land his feet on the Mount of Olives, will then enter in through the eastern gate. Here's something that's very interesting about that eastern gate. It's still there today. You can visit it. You can look at it on Google and Google images of it. But if you want to go visit it and look at it, it's still there today. Muslim leader of the Ottoman Turks, Suleiman the Magnificent, was during the Middle Ages about to take over the entire world. He was a world conqueror. He was one battle from conquering the entire world when he died. He died in his tent on the edges of the encampment for war. And it's a very interesting story when you read about the historical portions of that. But Suleiman the Magnificent was aware of this, that the Jewish leader, the Jewish God, would be returning and coming through that gate. He commissioned and had two things done. Number one, he sealed up the gate, and it is closed and sealed to this day. Now, that's actually a part of Bible prophecy. Suleiman didn't know that he was fulfilling it, but historically he did when he sealed it up. The other thing that he did was he put a cemetery outside the gate in front of that gate. He had a cemetery put there, thinking that no one, because to come through that area would make them unclean. So those were two things that he did. That's a part of history. It's still there to this day. It's not speculation. You can go and look this up. You can walk in the footsteps if you want to. Okay. It's not one of those, hey, I heard this story from somewhere, but I can't give you the resources. This one's easy to find.
Interesting piece of biblical history. It really is.
Think about it, is absolutely chilling. And that Eastern Gate is still closed to this day, and that's a part of Bible prophecy. So we've strayed way off the trail. I don't even know where we are in our notes, Kay. I apologize.
Oh, you're fine. I mean, you're answering my questions, and I appreciate it. Okay. Chad, did you want to say anything?
Oh, I'm good. I'm sitting back and enjoying this.
Okay.
I heard beeps and bells and things in the background. I thought Chad had pulled out a video game or something. I thought
no. That was
it waxed off the side.
That was me. I kept getting kicked off.
Oh, okay.
All right. It was a struggle to get back, but praise God I did.
I didn't know what was going on. I thought Chad may be texting with someone.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. My phone's on silent, and everybody just has to do without me for a while.
Okay, I don't know where we are in our line of questioning.
I think the next place we need to look at is with the way things are being projected now, and we're getting it from everywhere about this body that's supposed to be in our solar system and affecting Earth. Do you feel that there are people in high places, the government, in religion also, that know about this and they're trying to keep it quiet? Or do you believe that the information is being put out there to also help control the masses? How do you see that?
Yeah, that's a real interesting question. It's just wow. There's so much there. How do we want to attack this? I said earlier that yes, I think we know about it. I think we've known about it since the 50s. I think we've sent space probes out to find it. I do think they found it. They've leaked out some information, and they've kind of let that dust settle and just kind of been quiet about it. At this point in time, you won't find any official capacity of government in any portion of the world talking about it or making official statements. There's always going to be that inside whistleblower on YouTube that has the fantastic information that no one else has. But there's no official government statement from any country around the world. And let's be clear, if this was going on, it is a worldwide event. Okay, it's not just, well, we get tunnel vision sometimes here in the United States. We're absolutely silly about it. It's a worldwide event. So, we're like, oh, well, the government's hiding it from us, or NASA's hiding it from us. Well, there's 17 space agencies around the world. China's just getting ready to put astronauts in space for an extended space mission. So there are other space agencies aside from NASA, and it's not like NASA can put the thumbprint on all of them. I've also heard people say that NASA is cloaking it, and so that we just can't see it. And I'm just like, I got to say that's pretty impressive if they're able to do that. But there are literally tens of thousands of astronomers, amateur astronomers around the world with their eyes on the sky. So I think if something is spotted, it's going to get out. One of the most difficult things to do, and we love a good conspiracy, but one of the most difficult things to do is to keep the lid on a conspiracy. And to be quite honest, the more people that know about it, the harder it is to keep things tightened down. It eventually gets out. I do think there's something out there. Do I think it's right around the corner? No, I don't think it's right around the corner. But there was a movie that was released by Paramount Pictures in 1998 called Deep Impact. It's
Yes.
during that time period where everybody had to put out their catastrophic end of the world movie, and there were several that were put out during that time, and I got sucked right into those. I loved those things. But I went back to this movie while I was writing the book, because as I was researching some things, I was like, wait a minute, I remember this. And I went back and I actually had the DVD and I put it in and I watched it. And in the first 20-25 minutes of that movie, they got this scenario so right that I had goosebumps. I mean, they absolutely 100% without question nailed it. Here's part of the problem. If you have this information, how are you going to disseminate it to the public at large without causing widespread panic? You have to do that in a controlled sort of way to do that. And I think this movie did a fantastic job of this. Now, it starred Morgan Freeman was the president. Tia Leone was a reporter. She's now the Secretary of State, so she's kind of really moved up. She's mad.
Yes.
And then Robert Duvall, I don't know what he's up to these days, and I say that in jest. Hopefully he's still alive. He is still alive, isn't he?
Who is it?
Every now and then I'll say, I don't know what they're up to, and find out that they died 5 years ago and I didn't know it. But if those of you that are really interested in what this would look like, if you can get your hands on that movie, through Netflix, Amazon Prime, order it through Amazon somewhere, you could probably get it for less than $10. The first 20 to 25 minutes is absolutely dead on point as
Yes, it is.
something like this would unfold. And, is someone hiding it from us? They may not be telling us everything that they know at this particular point. I can't argue that. I mean, and let's be honest, the governments of the world certainly are not transparent about everything, nor should they be. Okay? They just shouldn't. I don't want to know everything there is to know. I want to get up and go to work in the morning and not worry about all the things that's going on in this world. Okay, so they shouldn't be transparent about everything. It's a matter of national security. There's your catchphrase. Okay, but this movie just absolutely nailed it as to how information would most likely be disseminated.
That's one of my favorite movies, to be honest. And I believe I just watched it on Hulu a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just one I watch every now and then. I liked it much better than, what was that called? Armageddon? With Bruce Willis.
The best part of Armageddon was when they're all going through their psychological testing, and I can't remember the name. Name guy who breaks down and cries, but that's.
That was Michael Clark Duncan, or Michael Duncan Clark, that just passed away
Yeah.
2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, it was wonderful to see him vulnerable, such a big guy and a big old teddy bear. Yeah, Deep Impact is definitely worth a watch. It keeps you on the edge of your seat, and it is accurate. When I saw that, I thought, wow.
Somebody
Because,
somebody did some very good research for that movie. It's very well done as far as how that would look. I
mhm.
got to say I couldn't.
Yeah, they would
I,
definitely wait till the last second to disseminate something like that because they know that everything would break down.
well, and they're also going to tell you what their contingency plans are. So not only and I think that's one of the things that the movie brings out pretty well.
Yeah.
Plus, in the movie, I'm not going to tell too much because I'm hoping people will watch it, but it also shows that behind the scenes, that things would have to be prepared
Mm-hmm.
before and be in the process before it could be released to the public. Because if they didn't, there would just be mass chaos.
Oh, sure.
People look for any reason now to loot or to kill or do anything. So they've got to have their ducks lined up in an order or there is no order.
Absolutely.
Like I said, I've at least seen it 20 times.
Yeah, you can pick that movie up at Walmart for $5 on DVD.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think it. I know it's still available. I wouldn't think it's too expensive.
Nah, it's like $5 brand new at Walmart.
But it's definitely worth having in your DVD library, that's for sure. Of course, Kay, you need to get a new DVD player, so
Yes, I
maybe
do.
your listening audience can get together and go, I've got a DVD player in the back room I'll send to Kay. It's
Well, I'd let my
only last year a Blu-ray. I'll send that out.
that would be nice. I'd let my middle son, borrow it before he moved out and got married. And when he returned it, it didn't work.
There you go.
So it's like,
Put
son,
a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in there, and one of the kids got to it.
yeah.
There you go. Listening audience, Kay needs a DVD player. So if you've got one that you're not using, just box it up, send it to Kay. Kay, you probably have at least a dozen of them, within the next 10 days or so.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you, Mark. Getting back to what we were just saying about the government and everything, what do you think about the way that all of this is being portrayed in the media, whether it is fringe media or it is the mainstream media? Because there's a lot of connection in there on this subject.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that really bothers me, and I'm just going to say that it really bothers me. I do, regardless of where the information is coming from. I think we have to be careful in what we say and how we present it. If we're speculating, say that you're speculating. Be careful in what way you give advice to people. Keep in mind that in some cases, the information that's being given, people will take action according to that, and that's a heavy responsibility. So don't take that lightly. I know there's many people out there that enjoy watching things along this line on YouTube and just listening to it for entertainment purposes only, and it doesn't necessarily entertain me, but I'm sure it entertains some because those particular types of channels, whereas they're completely irresponsible in the information that they give, and at times to the point of having no credibility whatsoever, they are still very, very popular. So, someone's listening, someone's tuning in, and that's what keeps churning out the information. What bothers me most about this is that I actually do believe that there is something out there that at some point in time in our future will interact with us again. And there was a time just a couple of years ago, you would have never heard those words come out of my mouth. I would have felt completely silly even, projecting something along that line. But I do believe that there's something out there at this point. We keep getting told bits and pieces about little discoveries that they're making on the fringes of our solar system, additional dwarf planets, and we've discovered this planet that's acting weird and that planet that's acting weird. And this is why I spent so much time in one chapter of my book going planet by planet through our solar system and pointing out some of the things about that planet that are really raise a red flag and say, this is kind of weird. And we went planet by planet by planet throughout the solar system, all the way out to Pluto. And every single one of them have markers that just kind of raises a red flag and makes you scratch your head and go, okay, what's going on here? Without question, our solar system was a very violent place at some point in the past. The question is, how long ago in the past are we talking about? And did all of these things happen in one window of time, or did they happen at different points of time? And that's a question that I can freely raise, but I can't responsibly answer. I can only point to information that's out there.
Are you referring to the Kuiper Belt?
No, I'm referring to all of our planets that we know about. Mercury, Venus, all the way out. I mean, Mercury, first of all, has no atmosphere whatsoever, no crust. It is the smallest of our planets. It's the planet closest to the sun. It has the tightest orbit around the sun, but its orbit around the sun is very elliptical. It's a very elongated oval. You would think a planet that size with such a small mass would, over a period of however old the universe is, billions of years, millions of years, I get lost in that stuff because, I would be one of the crazy people that thinks that it could be just a few thousand years old. But anyway, you would think that over a long period of time, that highly elliptical orbit of that small planet Mercury would begin to balance out into a more consistent circle around the sun as opposed to an elliptical, and that at some point in time, given enough time, with the gravitational pull of the sun on such a small planetary mass, that planet might actually drift closer and closer and closer into the sun. It's just really abnormal. You look at Venus. Venus rotates backwards, and it's upside down. It's almost stopped in its orbit as far as the length of time it takes to rotate a complete length of a day and the amount of time it takes to orbit around the sun. It's a highly volcanic planet. In fact, over 75% of the planet has been, quote unquote, recently resurfaced through volcanic activity. These are the types of abnormalities that we look at in the book and just raise questions about, because these are data facts that we know, but we don't have specific cause and effect for what we see. And with each one of these, I give plenty of footnotes so you'll know where the information is coming from. But these are the things that I'm pointing to when I say we have data within our own solar system that points to something very violent and catastrophic interacting with our solar system, at least at some point in the past. That's no guarantee that there's going to be an interaction at any point in the future. Maybe all the dust is settled and everything's better now. I don't personally think so. I think that is an indication that there is a cycle of events, and that's kind of where the information leads. As far as today and the way information is presented and things of that nature, people do it for entertainment, shock value, things of that nature. I personally think that's irresponsible because I do think some people get swept away, caught up in it. It does destroy relationships. It does destroy families. And I'm being kind when I say that because I don't want to sound mean, but it does destroy relationships and it does destroy families. Think of this information that someone is picking up secondhand off of your YouTube video feed, and they're trying to tell to their friends at work or their family members because they're legitimately concerned and they care. And they're trying to tell those people that, yes, there's this Planet X is going to be coming, next March, and the entire Earth is, and I've got to do something to save you. You're putting them in that type of a situation when you present it in that way, because there are some people who pick that up and run with it, and it separates them from people they love, and in many cases, it puts them in a place where people look at them differently and they associate with them differently, and it ruins lives. And I'm being nice about that, but it bothers me, and it bothers me intently. This message of doom and gloom, the sky is falling, these chicken littles that just crow that everywhere, I've got no use for them. I really don't. I don't think they have any insight prophecy. I don't think they have any insider message. I don't think they have anything that would substantiate their claims in the least. Think of it for a minute. If they believed that this planet was going to be interacting with Planet X or Nibiru or whatever catastrophe that they want to circle a date on the calendar for so that they can create the next YouTube video, they wouldn't be promoting YouTube videos. They would be prepping and digging a hole in the ground for their own family. Okay, they wouldn't have time to put out a YouTube video because everything else in their life would be so much more important than getting you to click on that next video. And that's just my own personal perspective of that. All of the ancient prophets that we see given place in the Bible as to their story, their lifetime, their message, who were legitimately given a message of judgment. That message was solemn. That message was sobering. That message was to the point, and that message was very, very true. The ancient nation of Israel was overrun and destroyed in two separate invasions. Assyria ravaged the northern portion of that nation in about 722 BC. This is history. This is stuff that you can go back and look up. They had prophets that were called by God to deliver a message to the people who were worshiping pagan gods. And God said, I'll have none of it. I will judge them. And he brought in the Assyrians. The Assyrians were the Klingons of the ancient world, so to speak. They were vicious. They were absolutely destructive of any nation. They ripped that nation culturally to shreds. They destroyed the culture. They disseminated that nation into other cultures so that culture itself just absolutely deteriorated and crumbled because of the mixture that they had. To read the history of Assyria and the way that they did siege warfare and their battles and the cruelty that they put on the people that they conquered in that time, it was absolutely brutal. Well, this is what happened to the northern kingdom of Israel because of their apostasy and because of their pagan worship. They were God's chosen people, but they chose to worship other gods.
Yes.
And God's prophets referred to them as playing the harlot. They were cheating. They were cheating, and they were punished for that. You move into the southern portion, and it was 100 or so years later, 120 years later, they were laid waste by Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon over a period of 3 separate invasions that started in about 606 and ended in 586. There was a small remnant saved in that, and you have the book of Daniel and the book of Ezekiel kind of take place within the exiles in Babylon. Both Daniel and Ezekiel are in Babylon. That's the background of their books. But again, this was a message that was brought to the people of God because they had turned from their devotion and worship of Yahweh, and they began to worship pagan gods. In the book of Ezekiel, we find that they had their pagan images in the very temple of Yahweh. And Yahweh had just had enough. And he sent them into exile. And he just absolutely cleared the land of them. These messages that were given to those prophets were heartbreaking for the prophets. As much as they were looking at the evil of the people And as much as they were calling them on the carpet for their misdeeds, to stand and look into the eyes of those who they knew and possibly those who they were related to, family members, and say that God is going to judge you by the sword, by famine, by pestilence, by wild beast, and a small remnant is going to go into exile and may return to this land in another generation. That had to be absolutely heartbreaking. Think of Noah as he stood before people and stood before those that he knew. And in his heart, he knew that he had been given a message from someone who not only had the power, but also the resolve to follow through. And the message was, the end of all flesh has come before me. That was a message of destruction, an extinction level event that was given to Noah that he had to deliver to the people that he knew, his contemporaries. And that we have these people on YouTube that want to put out a new video every week. You've got to see this. This is now the end. Now the end is here. And this, listen, this stuff is serious when it happens. And I believe seriously that it will happen because the Creator is very adamant about who He is and that He shares worship with none other, no one else. So when you say, what bothers you about the way this is presented today, and Kay, you brought it up early in the broadcast, the fear porn and things of that nature, yeah, it annoys me to no end, these types of things, because it destroys life on one end and it takes the gravity and the soberness of the message and makes a mockery of it on the other. And that bothers me. It absolutely bothers me.
And people will not believe then when the real message is, we've got this going on, people. You need to pay attention. It's going to be the little boy who cried wolf.
Absolutely. And honestly, folks, those of you who are listening, and I may have run off everyone but Kay and Chad at this point, I don't know. It may just be the three of us. But those of you who are listening, look to your children and think about what you want to put in their thoughts.
Yes.
Because they take you at your word. They take you at your word. Think about what you're saying. Think about what you're following. Think about what you're buying into. There is nothing wrong with being critical. Listen, the truth does not have a side, and it is not offended when you question it, because it will stand up to any scrutiny.
Amen.
Think of your children, okay?
I get so many emails from people that are absolutely terrified at this time. And that's an obsession with them. They're asking me, is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? And, you know, one of the messages that I really wanted to get across tonight, and both of you have really, really put it out there, we don't have anything to fear. As long as we are walking with God and we're close to God, God tells us, you know, we are to fear Him, but we're to fear Him as a Father. And we're not to have fear in our daily walks. To me, fear is the opposite of faith. Because when we walk in faith with God, we have nothing to fear. And everything that has ever happened in history, there has been something positive that has came out of it and that has glorified God. And when you look at the time of the crucifixion, it was heartbreaking for what Christ went through. But He did it for a reason. And we glorify God in everything that we do. And if we're spreading this fear and this fear porn, and it's wagging tongues and itching ears, that goes completely against what God has called us to do. And I am just like you, Mark. I see this going on. It angers me, a righteous anger. It breaks my heart. And as you said, we need to look to our children, and we need to even watch what we're listening to on broadcasts, on television, the news, everything, because our kids trust us. They look up to the parents. They look up to the grandparents. And we need to think of that instead of taking something that someone may enjoy that gets into the fear porn. What's that do to a child?
Mm-hmm.
They're scared to death. Mom, are you saying that tomorrow or next month the world's going to end? They don't understand. So we have to approach this in the way that God wants us to and discern everything. Take it to God. Look at the scripture. Hold it up. As you said, Mark, that the truth is there. God has told everything from the beginning to the end. We're going to know when something's about to happen because we can follow right along with the prophecies.
Well, and this is, Kay, as you so clearly pointed out, when you hear it over and over and over again and nothing happens, you develop a callous attitude towards it. And I will tell you, and I think we said this early on, probably in the first 20 minutes of the broadcast, and I never came back to it. There is an asteroid out there that will have a close pass with the Earth. It's still a few years out as far as when its cycle will bring it within that keyhole window of the Earth, and then it will have a return, I want to say about 7 years later. And the funny thing is, when I researched it the first time, the date that they were projecting for it actually fell on Friday the 13th, which I found quite humorous. But the name of the asteroid, it's been given a name, and you can research it. Nothing's being hid from us. The name of the asteroid is Apophis, and that, I believe, Apophos or US, one of the two. But if you get Apophs, your Google will probably complete it for you. But that information's out there. It's probably changed since the last time that I researched it, but it's not hard to find. This idea that the government is just protecting themselves and they're not telling us, that's fear porn. It absolutely is 100%. And we need to be. We need to hold some of these folks accountable for the garbage that they put out. If you want to consider it entertainment, that's one thing. But, when someone's putting this stuff out, not as entertainment, but as an alert and an alarm to warn you about soon coming destruction, and we need to hold those folks accountable for that. Because it is absolutely, as I said, destructive in some people's lives. It's not just entertaining. And that is something that legitimately does bother me.
It's like standing up in a theater and screaming fire.
Yeah. So
that's illegal.
Hopefully we've brought, some common sense approach to the topic tonight. There is plenty of information out there. Information that is worthy of research and study and looking deeper into it, especially if it's something that interests you. And hopefully we brought some of that to light tonight.
The truth is much more interesting than the lies.
Well, and hopefully it's something that we can build upon. As I said, I'm looking back at ancient records and I'm pointing you to where I found it. I read some of that and go, this is absolutely astounding. It is difficult to believe, but it is recorded. And, I don't want to make light of that, that it's a part of our recorded past history. It's there.
As I've told you and everyone else knows, I absolutely love the book. And this portion of the book is one of my favorites because it is. So you look at it and you think, this is all planned. It's not just happenstance. It's a plan.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that we can rest in with our Creator is that He is dependable. He is faithful and just to do that which He has said He will do, and He's pretty transparent about what He expects of us. And the fact that He does realize we are human flesh and we fail, we fall short. I mean, He doesn't expect us to be perfect. He expects us to honor Him. If He expected us to be perfect, that would be our way to salvation. You can't do anything to morally morally gain salvation. You can't do anything to morally lose salvation. It's about the work of Christ, what Christ has done for you, and that work that we could not do for ourselves. And God said,
Yes.
if you'll just accept the fact that I am who I say that I am, and that I've reached out to you because I want to have a relationship with you, and I've done for you what you were unable to do for yourself, because you are flesh, you are blood, you do have certain weaknesses, and I don't require you to be perfect. You know, every religion out there requires you to somehow get better and better and better and ascend to the level of the gods. Christianity doesn't do that. It meets you where you are and says, I realize that you're not perfect. And that's why I became flesh for you, because I could do what you couldn't do. And if you'll just accept the provision that I've made for you and honor and glorify and worship me, if you'll love the Lord thy God, make me your God, and love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, we'll call it good. We'll call it good, because his provision clearly was through his son, Jesus Christ. And he not only sent him to live and to deliver the message, he sent him to die, and then he raised him from the dead so that we might have confirmation. And he says, you know, if you'll believe that simple plan, we'll call it good, but serve me and me only. I'm God, you know, and that's all he wants. That's it.
Amen.
In a nice simple nutshell.
So well said, Mark. You brought me to tears. That's beautiful. It's so true. Chad, as we're wrapping up, is there anything that you did want to say? Or Mark, is there anything that we've missed that you wanted to include?
I've had a good time talking with you guys tonight. I know we've rabbit trailed on some things. It just seems like we're kind of given to that from time to time, but hopefully we've provided enough useful information that people at least have some things to consider and to think about. Again, I would like to say that, you know, you've mentioned my book a couple of times, and I think members of your audience, your listening audience, have purchased my book. I think I've seen comments along that line, and I do appreciate that. I'm not about selling books. Honestly, I'm not. My book's out there. It's cheaper to buy it from Amazon than it is for me. I can't make it available at the same price they can because they buy it in bulk. So that's the cheapest place to get it. You can get it through, for those of you that like to read ebooks, it's available as an ebook. I think that costs even a little bit less. So if you're interested in that, I tried to document everything I could, but, you know, more than anything else, I'm interested in looking at this story. It was my personal journey, because if it's true, if this story is true of the story of Noah and the flood, this is perhaps the most critical event in all of human history, aside from the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, because this was a putting to a close everything that was creation and reopening a new pathway. And we're going to be looking at that new pathway in the next book, and trying to, again, lay some popcorn trails that people can follow to see some of the things that maybe we've overlooked as we've read through the story or heard those flannel graph lessons in Sunday school. And hopefully, again, we give information that people will find of interest and worthy of thought.
Excellent. Chad, I saw you flash a little bit on Skype. Was there something that you wanted to put in?
Nah, I think we touched on quite a bit of stuff, so I think it's a really well-rounded episode.
We love having you on, Mark.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's an honor and always fun to talk with you guys, and I do appreciate it.
Same time next week?
Oh, sure. Let's do that. Always a good conversation.
Well, you know we'll be calling you again. It's Mark. It's time. Would you like to tell everyone how they can get in contact with you? And you've already said about how to get your book, but if you'd want to repeat that again, that's good. I urge everyone, get a copy. I know Mark is not here, like he said, to sell books, But I encourage everyone out there, pick up a copy. It is, like I said earlier, a page turner, and it's a great reference book. I keep it right with Gary Wayne's Genesis 6 Conspiracy and right by my Bible. So pick it up.
The easiest way to find me is you can find me on Facebook, but I've got to let people know that I get tons of friend requests on Facebook. I friend very few people. And there's a reason for that. I'm not being a snob. There's a reason for that. If you look, I've probably got less than 150 friends on Facebook at this point, but tons of people are able to follow me. It's my personal page that I use to interact with personal friends and family and things of that nature. So I post a lot of things there that aren't associated with the book. But if you want to follow me, you're welcome to follow me. And if you comment on anything there, usually I'll acknowledge it and respond to it. I just don't accept a lot of friend requests because there's a lot of trappings that goes with Facebook where you get friend requests from all types of accounts that you can't really verify. And sometimes when you accept those, it creates problems for everyone who's associated with you. So I've just decided to not accept a lot of friend requests. And again, I'm not trying to be a snob. My page is open to the public, so you can follow me. It's just, when you click on it and send the friend request, it'll say you're now following Mark. And if you see something on my page that you want to comment on, you're able to comment on it. You're not locked out, and I'll probably respond to the comment. I also, on Facebook, have a page called Mark Combs Author, and my name is spelled with a K, M-A-R-K. My website is markcombsauthor.com. And that's the easiest places to find me. I'm also on Twitter, but I'm kind of in and out with Twitter as to how much I'm on there. But those are the easiest places to find me. If you want to send me an email or a comment or something along that line, you can either do it through Facebook or you can do it through my website. There's a contact me link on that. So that's kind of the easiest. Or you can send it through Chad, and Chad will send it to me.
That's right.
I'll bring Chad in the loop as he'll translate and send me that out.
Oh, okay. Wow. You guys crack me up. I'm going to go ahead then and say tonight's closing prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, tonight has been such an awesome night of fellowship. We could feel your presence, Father, leading tonight's broadcast and taking us in the directions that you wanted us to go. We seem to do that with Mark a lot. It's wonderful the way that you lead and we follow because it enlightens all of us. And we pray that the listeners, that they have been enlightened also, and they could feel your power going through tonight's broadcast. Please bless everyone that's listening. Bless Mark and Chad and myself. Get us through another week and let us walk with you closely, Father. Let all of us hear you and get as close as we can. And those that are listening that aren't close to you or haven't heard your call, please let their hearts be softened, Father, and their ears open so that they can hear your call to them. It's free. The gift of salvation is free. What better can anyone ask for, Father? You have given us the ultimate gift. And I say this in love, Father, and thank you again. In Jesus' holy and mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Again, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, everyone that's tuned in. We pray that you all have a blessed week. And that's it for tonight, folks. Good night, everyone.
All right.
Into the night, I raise my hand hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light